Hello, I'm Gloria Makarenko. While many of us are staying close to home this summer, it is a great chance to just appreciate the amazing talent we have right here. Just look around. This is our Vancouver. Coming up, how Coho Coffee is combining local food with a wide range of flavors from around the world. And what the remarkable return of wild sea otters means for the BC coast. But first, making a beautiful film in public spaces that were emptied by the pandemic. Now, by now, we all know the importance of physical distancing. But that still doesn't make the emotional or physical challenges of not being able to touch each other any easier. So that is the subject of a beautiful, wordless short film shot during the early days of COVID-19 restrictions in Vancouver. Kirsten Wicklund and Peter Smida are the dancers, actors, and choreographers for Ballet of a Lonely Heart. Hello, you two.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing very well, and beautiful work there, really. So you are partners, so we don't have to feel uncomfortable. It's safe for you to be this close together. So Peter, what's the story behind the film?
So basically it's a story about a man and a woman who fall in love, and they have this struggle surrounding the ability to touch one another. So there's this force that kind of allows them not to touch, and it's just sort of like about their journey in sort of managing that and their struggle in sort of adhering to that rule.
Well, whether it's you two on film or all of us, I guess, in reality, we're all sort of dealing with that same kind of struggle. So, Kirsten, I mean, usually dance does involve a lot of touching, whether you're supporting or catching or lifting or twirling or that type of thing. How did you approach choreography with this when the dancers can't touch?
Yeah, of course, it actually was safe for us to touch. However, this brought us a great task of having to actually be separate. So some things that we did was we took duet material that we had created, things with lifts and a lot of contact, and we separated ourselves and we tried to see kind of what we could make out of that and how we could adapt it and still find like a sense of connection, even just in the space that was between us. So we were able to just explore some different methods of creation and adapting our work that we would normally kind of do in partnership, adapting it more solo.
Yeah, it's funny when we bring in that word normally, isn't it? I mean, you both normally dance on a stage, pretty classic. I mean, in this film, you're in the woods, you're at the beach, you're on the art gallery steps. So Peter, from your perspective, just how different was this experience?
It's always really exciting to be able to dance in spaces other than a studio or a stage. It's something that we've both kind of done before as dancers. But there's a lot of kind of added challenges, like your footwear, for instance. Normally we're dancing in like a special ballet shoe or a sock or barefoot. And so when you have a sneaker on, it really changes your whole physicality, the whole way that you're able to move. And I actually really enjoy that challenge of trying to adapt material that you would normally be able to, maybe slide in a sock or a dance shoe. Or get really be able to feel the floor. I really like the challenge of adapting movement for a sneaker or another kind of shoe on grass or a set of stairs. I feel like almost rather than challenges, they almost open up new possibilities and they push your choreography or your work to go in a direction that it may not have originally gone.
I'm thinking about the timing because you filmed this back in May. There were far fewer people out and about in the month of May. So, Kirsten, what was that like? It was almost like your set is all expanded, but performing in these public spaces that would normally be, full of people.
Yeah, it was really mirrored, I think, the personal feelings that we were having at the time, like this kind of sense of really being isolated, really being alone, which was a lot of what the subject matter of the film also was, a lot of like these two people who were lonely and they wanted connection, and there was no one around. So the environment of the city naturally reflected that, and it gave us almost a kind of a live component to work off of. It was very quiet in the areas that we were filming, vacant, deserted. So it all really helped us kind of relate to those themes, I think.
Well, Kirsten, can you help us? Because I understand as dancers, you're more aware than most about your physical relationship to other people. So do you have any advice for the rest of us who are still trying to figure out, how to maintain the physical distancing and still navigate around each other in public every day?
Yeah, I see all sorts of people on the street trying to negotiate with one another. How does that work? Luckily, that's, a lot of what we do in the studio is managing our distance and our spatial relationship to one another. It's funny to see people kind of forget that there might be someone close behind them. So we wanted to, we thought, people could think about like 360 degree.
Yeah, keep your neck on a swivel, just remember there's people behind you. And it's like when you're driving a car, it's the same sort of awareness.
That's right. Look in your rear view mirror, sort of. I get it. I always find myself just kind of stopping halfway toward a hug, and it's like, we can't do this anymore. So changing times indeed. Well, thank you for approaching this with grace and artistry. Really nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jade. Hi, I'm Vida. And you're watching Our Vancouver.
Well, it's time now for one of our favorite features when we get to showcase some of the photographs that are sent in by you, our audience. First up, Ben Christie took this photograph of a hummingbird at Terra Nova Park in Richmond. Just beautiful, Ben. Richard Vidad captured the Burnaby Mountain Conservation Area in silhouette during sunset. Very, very cool. And finally, Rob Alexander took this photograph of a bumblebee on a bull thistle at Ambleside Park in West Vancouver. Thank you, Rob. And it's easy to send them to us. Just email your photographs to bcphotos@cbc.ca. That's bcphotos@cbc.ca. Now, if you want to take better care of the plants in your own backyard, here is UBC Botanical Garden teacher Egan Davis with some summer gardening tips, courtesy of the CBC Creator Network.
Hi, I'm Egan. Today I'm going to talk about all of the things that you need to think about when you're gardening in the summer. Gardening should be fun, and in the spring, it's easy. The seeds germinate, it's nice and cool out, lush, soft, green growth. But the summer's a whole different ballgame. It gets hot, there's water stress, maybe there's bugs eating your plants, and hey, what's that powdery mildew on my leaves? As the season changes from spring to summer, it's important to understand that you're going from cool season to warm season. And there are cool season plants that grow better in the spring, and there are warm season plants that grow better in the summer. Often what will happen is cool season plants will bolt, which means they will flower when it gets hot. That's what they're programmed to do. Be careful if you're fertilizing and watering, because if plants get too lush, they're going to be more susceptible to pest and disease. Not only that, but soft tissues from overfeeding or overwatering will actually be less resilient in the heat, and plants will lose more water, requiring more irrigation. Number one question: how do I know how much to water? The only way to know is to check for yourself. So take a tool and dig and look to see how dry the soil is. If you do this regularly, you get in tune with how quickly the soil dries out, and if you do it before you water and after you water, you'll get a good sense for how deep the water that you're putting on the ground is actually penetrating. If you water deeply and less often, the surface will dry and roots will go deep looking for water. And what about insect pests? It's important to understand that you need to tolerate a little bit of pest damage. In fact, pests in the garden are good because they actually attract predator insects that you're trying to encourage that keep the pest populations in check. Everybody recognizes a ladybug as a predator insect, but do you know what a ladybug larva looks like? Are you having problems with slugs? One way to trap them is to put boards out in the garden, and in the morning flip the boards up and there's your slugs. What's the #1 task in the garden? Weeding! Annual weeds like chickweed and peppergrass produce tons of seeds and create a seed bank in the soil that lasts for years. So every time you dig, you expose fresh seeds to light and water, and poof, you get weeds growing again. That's why it's important that if you're trying to control the weeds in gardens, you've got to keep the ground covered. So you can use mulches, and in between your crops, you can use cover crops. Here we're using buckwheat as a cover crop to suppress the weeds. I never advise using pesticides or herbicides in the garden. Rather than putting a Band-Aid on the problem and spraying plants with yucky chemicals, figure out what the underlying issue is and learn something. That's what gardening is. For example, powdery mildew spores are everywhere, so you can't eliminate the pathogen. And some plant varieties are more susceptible than others. And it really takes off when the weather's hot and dry in areas where there's not much airflow. So you can pick a resistant variety and find a spot that's going to be less favorable for the disease. So enjoy the bounties of summer and have fun. Remember, the challenges you have with gardening are terrific opportunities to learn.
Now, we all love a story with a happy ending, don't we? And it doesn't get much better than this one. As CBC News first reported, it involves a stolen teddy bear with a mother's final voice message to her daughter. Tina Lovegreen has more.
Did it. Mama Bear's home.
Back in her arms, where it belongs. Mara Soriano spent 5 days searching the streets of Vancouver for this teddy bear.
If you ever see it anywhere, there's a cash rewards.
A gift from her mother who passed away from cancer last year with a special message.
A part of me will always be with you forever.
It's just the last thing I have of hers. It has her voice on it, and it says, I love you, I'm proud of you, and I'll always be with you. And when you miss someone that much, sometimes you need to hear that.
But on Friday, while she was busy moving, someone stole her backpack with her iPad and the bear in it. In just days, the story of the stolen bear made it around the world, appearing on ABC's Live with Kelly and Ryan.
The thing that was special about this stuffed bear.
Vancouver-born movie star Ryan Reynolds even offering a $5,000 reward for the bear's safe return. Steven Sharanowski found the bear while he was searching for his friend's stolen bike, and last night returned it to its rightful owner right here at CBC Vancouver.
She was like just ecstatic waiting. We couldn't even get it fully out of the bag before she snagged it up and hit the ground crying.
Sharanowski has been living in this tent city in Vancouver's Strathcona Park for about a month now. He lost his mother a few years ago too, and knows the pain of having something sentimental stolen.
I know how much it means to get stuff back when you lose it, right? Especially something that's so touching.
As for the reward, he says a friend of Ryan Reynolds contacted him and took his banking information, but he hasn't checked to see if the money's there yet. He's just happy the bear is back where it belongs.
Guys, we found her, we did it.
It's the reunion we all needed. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
Coming up, Johanna Wagstaff reveals where a group of local astronomers say is the world's best place to put a telescope.
How far is science willing to go for the clearest view on Earth of the stars at night? Well, how about a multi-week trek to the highest point on the Antarctic Plateau? This is the location that a team of international researchers, including 2 astronomers from the University of British Columbia, have pinpointed as the best place on the planet for a telescope. Take a listen to UBC astronomer Paul Hickson, a co-author of the study, about why he thinks it's worth it.
We found that the atmosphere is better here than anywhere else that's known on Earth, which means the images would be sharper by a factor of maybe 4 or 5. And that means that they would also be brighter because the light is more concentrated into a smaller area. which makes the image brighter by a factor of 16 to 25. And so you can see things that are up to 25 times fainter when you're at a good site like this.
The combination of high altitude, low temperature, long periods of continuous darkness, and an exceptionally stable atmosphere makes this site a very attractive location for optical and infrared astronomy.
But the problem that we have observing from the Earth, one of the problems, is that the atmosphere is turbulent. You know, if you look at something across a, say, hot pavement, it all seems to shimmer and shake. And the same kind of problem affects astronomical images to different degrees. So that's why astronomers try to go to high mountains to get above much of the atmosphere.
But after some of the researchers actually made this sojourn to this proposed site in Antarctica, they set up monitoring instruments. They found the boundary layer even thinner here than our current best spots. Their test telescope observed the sky fully automatically at an unmanned station in Antarctica for 7 months, where air temperatures dropped to minus 75 degrees Celsius at times. In itself, that's a technological breakthrough. So the next step is to analyze the images they have and hope that the next phase will see the world's dream telescope realized. And now you're Science Smart. If you have a science question on your mind, send me a tweet and I'll try to get it answered.
Johanna, thank you very much. Hi there, welcome back to Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now, over the past month, the CBC has been highlighting some of Metro Vancouver's unique neighborhoods, and we found a lot of love for Surrey's sleepy residential community of Cedar Hills. Jesse Johnston explains.
This is the heart of Cedar Hills, 96th Avenue and 128th Street. You've got strip malls, some restaurants and shops, and traffic. But this isn't what all the fuss is about. What makes Cedar Hills special is the people who live here. People like Garth Newlands, who's loved it since he moved in more than 40 years ago.
It seems you can't go more than 3 or 4 blocks in any direction and there's a park. So there's lots of things for kids to do around here.
He's not kidding about the parks. They're everywhere. It's a neighborhood that's green and quiet. The kind of neighborhood you name your pipe band after. Newlands is the Cedar Hills Caledonian Pipe Band Pipe Major, and he plays the same 106-year-old set of bagpipes his grandfather played during the First World War.
It's been a great name for us over the time. People are very inquisitive as to where Cedar Hills is, because it's not a well-known community in the area. But it's starting to gain some more popularity and notoriety.
And he's not the only musician who lives here. Emmerich Baines made a name for himself singing for passengers on the bus he drives every day for TransLink. When he's not behind the wheel, he's writing and recording songs. He loves his community so much, he wrote a song about it called Super Sweet City.
The main thing that I like is the people. The people are friendly. It's like you are in a village. It's not like in a big city where everybody's running and no time to talk to each other.
Cedar Hills doesn't have shiny glass skyscrapers or a spectacular waterfront, but the people who live here love it. Because of the park, sure, but mostly because of the people. Jesse Johnston, CBC News, Surrey.
You're watching Our Vancouver.
Now, when you're looking over a restaurant menu, you're probably focused on how things are going to taste. But there are some eateries that also make using local ingredients and reducing food waste high priorities. And that certainly applies to Taeyoung Chang, head chef at Coho Coffee. Taeyoung, hello there.
Hey, Gloria, how's it going?
It's going well. So Coho Coffee, part of this Coho Collective in East Vancouver. Tell us about the collective.
Yeah, so the collective is kind of the overbearing structure of 3 separate commissaries throughout Vancouver that hosts about 80 separate businesses. And the coffee shop is the only one of its kind on Clark and East Georgia. And what we try to do is use all of our members' products in a cafe menu that makes sense.
So how do you decide which foods to feature when you're putting together that cafe menu?
Well, it is 80 small businesses, and they're all very hungry entrepreneurs. So a lot of them approach me, but it is just kind of approaching them too, and having that kind of conversation, that really collaborative process to see what kind of goes with our values and what would make sense.
Okay, so just give me an example of how that would play out. You know, how one of your menu items came together through those conversations.
Yeah, one of the companies here is Van Koji. So it's a single woman named Tanami. She makes koji, which is a fungus, like a mold, similar to miso, and it's very salty, really umami forward. And we would love to use that, but we just didn't know how. I really like mushrooms. I really like toast. We had a bakery, and it all just kind of went from there and fell into this mushroom on toast dish that we have now.
Okay, it sounds lovely, but people may know you, though, from your commitment to reducing food waste. So how did this become important to you?
I feel like a lot of the food waste thing was built on community. When I first started my last business, it was thinking of how I could give back. And when I heard that there was this massive food source that we were throwing away just because of how it looked, it kind of bridged across all of my values of not judging things by just, I guess, not judging a book by its cover and just making the most of what we have.
Okay, well, let's not judge an orange by its peel then. I mean, let's take an orange, for example, then. How would you use the entire fruit?
Yeah, I mean, we have a few examples here. So an orange. Before I took over the menu, we would do a fresh squeezed orange juice, and we would throw away the entire peel as well as the rind, as the pulp too. So what we have instead is, let me just flip it over, is we make a marmalade out of the rind. From the peel, we steep it into vinegar. The segments we use as a garnish on a few separate dishes. The zest we cure tuna with, as well as the zest we put into our orange dressing. And we also macerate some seasonal fruits as well with that too.
Oh, I like that. Hey, you've got some things laid out there in front of you. Tell us more.
Yeah, definitely. So on our left here, we have a couple of our members' products that we use in the salads. Tall Shadow Sourdough, Indian Pantry Masala, as well as Kula's Pili Pili sauce. And all of that gets combined in our feature salad, which is a kale one. So it uses oranges in the dressing, oranges as a garnish, oranges to cook the carrots. And it was just trying to figure out different ways to use this one waste product that we had.
If your philosophy is to reduce waste, and you also want to have some really interesting ingredients, I guess, how do you encompass both of those philosophies in your business model?
For sure. I mean, whenever we do approach a recipe and wherever we're doing menu development, it's always questioning every single step and seeing where the waste occurs and why is it occurring. So when it came with something like the oranges, or if we're experimenting with a broccoli salad right now, usually the stems are thrown away for no apparent reason other than you just throw them out. But what we do is turn that into a slaw, we char the florets, and just separate them almost like you would a piece of meat and just get the most out of each one. It's trying to remove waste out of the entire equation.
Well, it sounds like you've really cast a wide net with different tastes and ingredients out there. Any interesting ingredients that are on your radar that you haven't quite figured out what you're going to do with them yet?
We have a vegan oyster sauce company that's joining us, as well as a coconut yogurt company too. And I'd really like to see how to incorporate those into more of a cafe menu while summer's still here. Yeah, as well as, I guess, Indian Pantry has a number of separate spices, simmering sauces, and blends, and just trying to incorporate more spices into our menu as well, too.
Well, you get back to the experimenting. We look forward to what you come up with, Taeyoung. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, lure of the lost lagoon. I dream tonight that my paddle blurs the purple shade where the seaweed stirs. I hear the call of the singing firs in the hush of the golden moon.
A lot of big events have been canceled or gone online since the pandemic hit. Bard on the Beach has canceled its entire season of live Shakespeare plays, but they recently announced Bard Beyond the Beach. Part of their free content is Bard Around Town. It's a weekly video series on YouTube. The first episode is centered on Stanley Park, looking back at Pauline Johnson, the local poet who gave Lost Lagoon its name. And, of course, the Shakespeare Garden, where many trees have quotes on their sides. So for more information, search for the Bard on the Beach channel on YouTube.
Kimmy? Hey.
David, you scared me.
Sorry.
Are you messing with me? Did you make those noises just now?
No. What noise?
You didn't hear anything?
Have you been missing the experience of new Canadian theatre? Well, Expect Theatre and CBC Podcasts have teamed up to produce The Quarantine Chronicles. It's a summer series of 7 original short audio plays featuring actors recorded remotely while isolating earlier this spring. So in the latest offering, local playwright Hiro Kanagawa's play Mizuko tells the spooky tale of a young couple haunted by a mysterious baby trapped between two worlds. For more information, go to cbc.ca/playmecbc.
Hey, I'm Grant Lawrence from CBC Music, and as you can see, I don't get out much these days, but I am still listening to new music, and I have a beautiful song for your summer staycation playlist from a band out of Oshawa, Ontario called Dizzy. But before you hear the brand new tune, let's spin some Dizzy musical history. That's one of the first singles released by this dreamy Oshawa indie band. The song there is called Swim. It was released on the band's debut 2018 album Baby Teeth, which won the Juno Award for Alternative Album of the Year. That's a heck of a start for your debut album. Here is another single from that award-winning record. It's called Joshua.
Joshua's a Gemini. He broke my heart. Wish I was too preoccupied to fall apart.
Another beautiful song from Dizzy featuring the hypnotic lead vocals of Katie Munshaw. And when fans discover this band, they tend to fall in love with Munshaw's voice, the ethereal sound of the band, and those lyrics. Here's what one fan had to say. A lot of us experience the weird kind of magic that exists when you're a kid wandering around your neighborhood in the summer with your friends. This album taps into that sort of everyday magic that many of us can relate to when you're growing up.
There's a howl that's inside my chest, in a place of a heart, in the shape of your fist. Show me the moves, you're the ventriloquist, and you give me a twist, yeah, you give me a twist.
That's Dizzy with Twist, a single from 2019. Okay, so this summer, the summer like no other, Dizzy released their new album. It's called The Sun and Her Scorch. And one of the singles from that record is the beautiful pop song called Roman Candles. It is currently burning its way up the CBC Music Top 20. Check it out. That's Dizzy with their latest single, Roman Candles, from their freshly released new album. It's called The Sun and Her Scorch. And that song, Roman Candles, is the song that you need to add to your summer staycation playlist for this week, because bands like Dizzy need your support now more than ever before. Remember, it's live performance, music, touring, shows. those will be the last to return to normal. So please do your part by keeping Canadian music alive. I'm Grant Lawrence. Stay safe, have fun, and I'll check in with you again soon.
Coming up, new conversations about how to frame the legacy of BC's founder, James Douglas. Hi, welcome back to Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. You can't tell the story of British Columbia without its founder, James Douglas. But how you tell his story matters a great deal. Justin McElroy reports on a proposed new plaque that would note all aspects of Douglas's complicated legacy.
Look around this province, and pretty much everywhere you go, you'll find James Douglas. In parks and street signs, in schools and more schools.
I think almost every historian of British Columbia believes if there had been no James Douglas, there would be no British Columbia.
Jean Barman wrote the preeminent book on British Columbia, West Beyond the West. She's currently writing a book on Douglas's correspondence with Britain's colonial office in the years when the Hudson's Bay Company man was appointed the first governor of the mainland colony of British Columbia.
There's just 25 years between when the first non-Indigenous people, apart from some people in the fur trade, came into this territory and British Columbia was a province. It was essentially the colonial office in charge. They put their faith in Douglas.
We tell the story of Douglas the same way we tell the story of John A. Macdonald or George Washington, the founding figure of British Columbia. But just like Washington and Macdonald, the way we tell Douglas's story is beginning to change.
I see him as kind of a beachhead where his ship came to the shore and established kind of a placement of the colonial marker, which had a detrimental impact on Indigenous people.
Brandon Gabriel is a Kwantlen artist and former historical researcher with the Kwantlen First Nation, whose members lived in the area for centuries before Fort Langley and James Douglas's arrival.
Their presence as a colonizing force wasn't met with on agreeable terms, and so, to put it nicely,
the record is clear. Douglas did have a huge part in diminishing and displacing BC's Indigenous populations. But there are reasons why campaigns to diminish his legacy haven't been as large as other colonizing figures.
It was like, oh, by the way, James Douglas was mixed race and black. And I'm like, oh, I didn't really know that.
Langley councillor Nathan Bahal wants to remember Douglas with a new display in Douglas Park. Like Douglas, Bahal is half black, and at a time when statues to colonizers are being taken down, he thinks a plaque for Douglas can go up.
A plaque acknowledging history is a lot different than a statue as well. And so I really want people to understand the complex history of this province and to celebrate the positive attributes and also acknowledge the horrific things that happened as well. And I think we can do both.
Whether that's true or not will be seen in the next year. The city will consult with both Black Lives Matter groups and the Kwantlen First Nation on the plaque. And the framework of BC history has often been fraught for Indigenous people.
The telling of the story of the making of this country and this province is largely has been developed by the colonizing forces.
It's a tension at the heart of the story of Douglas. Half black, husband of a Cree woman, the dominant treaty maker and colonizer in BC history.
He did center Indigenous people almost all the way through his life, but you have to, it's how you tell the stories.
The story of Douglas is one we'll continue to retell, but how we tell it will say as much about us as it does him. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Fort Langley.
Coming up, how the return of sea otters is changing BC's coastal ecosystem. Welcome back to Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now, off the coast of BC, something remarkable is happening. Sea otters, once decimated by the fur trade, are making a comeback. Greg Rasmussen explains.
In search of the elusive sea otter, tough to spot in the waters near the northern tip of Vancouver Island.
Usually out of these reefs we have otters.
It's critical to find and count them to document their growing impact on the ecosystem.
Yeah, there's one lying on his back.
Right on. Oh yeah, got him.
Feet up in the air.
Once wiped out entirely in BC by the fur trade, they are now making a comeback.
And now I see two more heads in there, a little closer to us, right in the kelp. 1, 2. So right now I see a female with a pup, and the mom's just come up. She's giving her head a shake.
Given their history as targets, they have good reason to be wary.
They can smell us from here. They could probably hear the motor, and the wind is blowing us right, so you can see their heads just trying to get away from us.
Researcher Aaron Foster takes advantage of a calm day
I think it's just behind the rocks.
to go ashore and count groups of otters called rafts. On this trip, we come across a growing colony of nearly 60 animals.
They look like they're scared, actually, but sometimes the wind will blow the raft apart a little bit.
Despite their cute and fuzzy looks, otters are a top predator, eating kilo after kilo of shellfish every day. Geoduck clams, urchins, crabs, and other underwater creatures.
So what am I looking at?
Yeah, so I mean, my guess would be he's a territorial male. He's quite fat.
And the other one's not so shy as a lot of them.
And he's checking us out. He's looking right at us. He definitely knows we're here. And he looks very big and healthy.
Their luxurious pelts made them a target for the fur trade starting in the 1700s. Once in the tens of thousands, they were wiped out, with the last known otter in BC shot in 1929. But their return wasn't by accident. 50 years ago, Canadian biologists traveled to Alaska to capture and relocate enough otters to resurrect them on the BC coast. It turned out to be a giant experiment on the entire West Coast ecosystem. In 1970, a Coast Guard ship was converted to transport a large number of otters to the west coast of Vancouver Island.
Sea otters were released in British Columbian waters. This may not have been home, but home was never like this.
It's a remarkable conservation success, really, when you think about it. So sea otters were extirpated in British Columbia by the early 1900s.
In the past 50 years, they've spread. From the 89 otters released, there are now more than 8,000 on the BC coast.
Sea otters are unusual just because they have such a huge appetite, and the change is so immediate and so direct. I mean, it's night and day.
Vancouver Island University Professor Emeritus Jane Watson has been studying sea otters for more than 30 years and was one of the first to document their profound impact.
No one was expecting it. When sea otters were reintroduced, no one knew that they were going to change ecosystem.
What they also didn't know was how it would impact the multi-million-dollar shellfish industry and the diets of many coastal Indigenous people.
We had big slam beach in Cayuga Doctors. That was the best slam beach that there ever was.
98-year-old Cayuga elder Hilda Hansen saw otters decimate clams, urchins, and other foods inside her community's traditional territory, something documented in a Simon Fraser University research project.
All what we eat was taken away by the cocoa.
Indigenous leaders hadn't been consulted, and scientists hadn't foreseen the impact of the otter's reintroduction on the food chain. But their return has an underwater upside. This is what's known as a sea urchin barren, created when the urchin population explodes. Without otters to control them, urchins devoured once huge kelp forests. But now, with otters returning, scuba divers are seeing the kelp come back. While Indigenous people had little say in the return of the sea otters, they're now adapting to the changes they're bringing.
All right, so where are we? We're at a place called Humdaspe. So it means the place of otter, and it's an old ancient village site.
Mike Willey is a hereditary chief from Kingcome Inlet. and also owns a wilderness tour company.
Boardwalk this whole place with tent platforms.
He's planning a high-end camping outpost for tourists, paying $1,000 a night.
I'm excited about it. It's bringing a new economy, isn't it? Sea otter viewing. It's giving our First Nations a chance out here to take part in mainstream economy.
He grew up on the water and sees a big difference between places that have sea otters and those that don't, such as his home community to the south.
You see the change. It's different down there. There's hardly any kelp forest down there, but there's lots of life up here. It's another world up here, and the balance that the otters will bring, right, is yet to be seen.
There's a couple tiny pups in this group.
For thousands of years, this coast was home to both sea otters and people. The key now is finding a fresh balance. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Hope Island, BC.
Okay, it's time to rewind the clock with the help of our CBC archives. Justin Trudeau may have had broad support to legalize marijuana, but 24 years ago, when Jean Chrétien was Canada's Liberal Prime Minister, even decriminalization was considered impossible. Here's Terry Malevsky with that story.
People say the hippies of the 1960s went on to be stockbrokers, but some things don't change. In the 90s, some of their children are fighting the same fight against the marijuana laws.
We are lied to by our government. We are imprisoned. We are hounded down. We are treated like dirt. This cannot go on any longer. This is long enough.
Mark Emery is Canada's leading entrepreneur of pot paraphernalia. He is now awaiting trial for selling marijuana seeds. His supporters turned out in force to mark the anniversary of a notorious bust in 1971, in which police cracked heads and were widely condemned for it. Some things have changed very little in 25 years. Marijuana possession is still criminal in Canada. People still routinely defy the law, and the police still routinely don't bother to enforce it.
Yeah, there are police monitoring the situation. It would not be prudent or wise, we don't think, to move in with regard to individuals smoking marijuana at a rally that is pro-decriminalization of marijuana.
So this time the police watched instead of cracking heads. But the law remains the same, only worse, in the opinion of many in this crowd.
Bill C-8, which is now law and will be put into effect this fall, this coming harvest season, will give the police the power to hire somebody to sell you marijuana. And then they get off and you get busted.
The government view is that decriminalizing pot is impossible because of international commitments.
What I think we cannot do is decriminalize it at this point in time, because there are international conventions that have been signed by every country that said that you cannot, that it is an illegal substance.
But imagine violating millions of the civil rights of your own countrymen, putting them in jail and spending billions of dollars merely to meet the obligations we've made to a foreign country. That's totally an anti-sovereign concept. That's like being a puppet state of, say, the United States.
And so the debate goes on very much as it did 25 years ago. The real difference may be that marijuana is now said to be BC's biggest cash crop. Terry Malevsky, CBC News, Vancouver.
CBC Vancouver is so fortunate to have an award-winning photographer on staff. Ben Nelms captured all sorts of images of life in our city. So here are some of his best of the week. And that's all for Our Vancouver for this week. I hope you'll be able to join me weekday afternoons on CBC Radio 1 for On the Coast. Goodbye for now.